Hey there kids, welcome back. David Eon in the video game room having another discussion with you about action figure and toy collecting. And the topic today, of course, is adult toy collecting and why it's not a new concept. You see, we live under this stigma of, grown-ups collecting toys, here's this new thing. But it's not necessarily new. It just seems that way because of the new interest in the adult collector's market where action figures are concerned. And that's Muhammad Ali from the new Mego. Mego is back. And I had talked about that actually in the previous discussion last week, why Mego makes more sense now than it did in the 70s and why it's kind of a good thing it's back in that regard. But yeah, when we were kids, there was an adult toy collector's market. We just didn't recognize what they were doing. Same as how young people today, they don't get what we're doing, collecting toys and action figures. You go up and down the toy aisle, you see grown-ups. You don't see kids in there anymore, right? You run into fellow collectors most of the time, as opposed to children who don't seem really that interested in action figures anymore. But what were they doing? See, back in the 70s and 80s, adult toy collectors were going after tin lithograph items. They were going after wind-up toys, model trains, pressed steel trucks, gumball machine prizes, crackerjack prizes, secret decoder rings, baby dolls, and fashion dolls, and especially cap guns were a big thing. Cap gun, which I have a kind of a soft spot for myself, growing up in the 70s and 80s, because cap guns lasted all the way, the main interest in cap guns lasted all the way until about the tail end of the 1970s before it started getting stupid and the industry, society didn't want the industry making cap guns that were too realistic because they were afraid that they would be used in holdups. So I guess they would prefer that you used a real gun in a holdup instead of a fake one. That's a whole other discussion. I've got this one sitting here. I just wanted to show that. That is my Spirit of 76 bicentennial cap gun from Roth American. Roth American made cap guns for like cheap places like Woolworth and stuff, but you will not find this on the card, especially unpunched. It just doesn't exist. And this is the cheap roll cap kind, the ones that never worked right. And the price tag I love. It's $1 and how much? 76 cents. But yeah, I've got an interest in cap guns myself. That's what these people were looking for. This is what grown-ups were buying and collecting when we were children. We just didn't see it. Model trains and stuff. And there was an even older generation than them who, when they were our age, when we were kids and people our age were collecting model trains and tin wind-up robots and cap guns and Barbie dolls, like 50s and 60s Barbie dolls, there was an older generation of people in their like 60s, 70s, and 80s that were collecting marbles and teddy bears and porcelain dolls and tin and lead painted soldiers. That's what they all grew up with, whereas we grew up in the era of the action figure. Remember, the concept of action figures really didn't come onto the scene until about the mid-1960s, courtesy of Hasbro, the G.I. Joe, the 1964 America's Movable Fighting Man. And speaking of which, because I have a complete set of the original boxed figures unplayed with, and these are like the Toy Fair ones, the dead-on 1964 editions. I've got all 4 of them. Which means that for those of you who are big Joe collectors, that means they have different bodies than the traditional G.I. Joes. There's a slight variation. Unplayed with condition. And people ask me all the time about the sticker sheet. They're like, is that a reproduction sticker sheet? No, it is the original sticker sheet. I've had this for decades. Back in the old days, there was no reproduction anything. So that's a new concept also. Reproducing stuff like making new dog tags or other reproduction items, the stickers, Star Wars pistols, that's getting to be a big problem now. But anyway, back to the point, we really didn't have action figures until about the 1960s, until about the mid 1960s. Like I said, 1964 with G.I. Joe, and really brought that onto the scene. And even that terminology didn't catch on right away, not for a long time. You often see advertising, think about it, you often see advertising from the 60s and 70s referring to action figures as what? Dolls. And they're not dolls, damn it, they're action figures. Well, some of them are dolls, let's just be honest. There's a few that you have to look at them and say, okay, that's kind of a doll. But that term, even though the term was out there, it didn't catch on until the late 70s, early 80s. So us right now in our age category, we grew up right in that sweet spot of action figure production and interest, which went from about 1964 to 1994, revolving around a 30-year period before they in turn were replaced with video game interaction as the toy of interest for children. Even though video games came on the scene during our era, really late 70s, early 80s, and then Atari became popular, and there were stand-up video arcade machines everywhere. They had them in laundromats and supermarkets back in the day. And then, of course, you had your Nintendo NES and Coleco and Sega and whatever else you remember from your childhood. That didn't really start to snowball, even though they were popular. It didn't really start to snowball as the toy of choice until the mid-90s. So, what happened? We replaced all the guys who collected model trains and tin litho toys. They're still out there, and their market hasn't gotten any cheaper, but there are fewer of them than in the past. We are the collectors of choice now with our interest in action figures. So the adult toy market has switched over to action figures because all the kids who grew up in that 30-year period, that little sweet spot from the 64 to 94 range, are our age now. And the toy manufacturers, believe me, they have caught on to this for the last couple of decades. And now much of what's being produced is targeting adults. NECA, Mezco, Funko, and Funko is the worst when it comes to this kind of stuff. Playmates, Hasbro, or HasLab, if you will, Hot Toys, all of them really, okay? All of them, Soap Studios, you name it. They've caught on to us. So since about the early 2000s, they've been slowly cranking out adult targeted product, and it's been slowly escalating. And quite frankly, it's getting to be a little bit of a problem due to a complete oversaturation of the market. But that's an entirely different topic. And that's something actually that I was planning on having another discussion on, the oversaturation of the adult collector's market. It's getting kind of weird. It's getting to be really a problem. But just wanted to throw that out there for you. Just wanted to discuss that with you, see what you think about all of that. The adult collector's market for toys has been there literally since toys were being constructed. Anyone who grew up in the era of mass production manufactured toys of any kind, when they became adults, went back and found that stuff again, and there's always been a market for it for over 100 years, for a long time. And if you go to any of the real big conventions, not the small ones, which quite frankly mostly have just new stuff anyways, Marvel Legends everywhere, Funko everywhere. If you go to the big shows like the Chicago Toy Fair, which I missed this year, unfortunately, I could not make it, and you walk around, you find some of these older guys, you know the booths. Many of you probably don't pay attention to them, but take a look, because they've got some interesting stuff. I love looking at the older stuff, quite frankly. The guy who looks like he's 60 or 70 years old, who's got like 100 cap guns, or has 100 tin litho wind-up robots or something. Those guys, they've got some interesting stuff, and they were there before us. So let me know what you think about all of that. Go ahead and put your comments in the comments section down below and get the discussion rolling. Let me know what your thoughts are about all of that. So you're not alone. I know they like to pick on us and call us nerds and make fun of us because, oh, you're collecting toys. Well, your parents did. Our parents did. They just collected something different. Like I said, they collected G scale or Ho scale model trains or wind up robots or original 50s and 60s Barbie dolls. They were into something. They were into something that we didn't notice or we didn't appreciate. So please do give the video a thumbs up if you got something out of it. I hope that you did. Share it if you can. Subscribe if you're new. Please do subscribe. The more of you there are, the more we can do here. Check out some of the other videos. We do a lot more than just basic discussions. So hopefully you find something that's interesting to you. Find me on Instagram, Open by Chance on Instagram. And what can I say but thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.